everybody. Gurmy's Coaster Yard here, and in today's episode of Germanator Studios, we are starting by renovating our hotel. Not the big resort hotel that we worked on several episodes ago, but we are renovating the little hotel building in the western section. So initially, I just wanted to have sort of a fake facade, but have an inaccessible building. But then I realized that in the western section, I didn't have a proper gift shop set up. So I decided this would be a good spot to have a gift shop, and it would sort of complete the, I don't want to call it a need, but maybe the desire to have all of the buildings on the little western street um, be completely accessible inside and out. So I started by deleting everything that was getting in the way, basically, and I placed the walls, the interior walls, how I wanted them to be. And I started with the wood walls, but you can see here I'm changing them to a sort of earth tone green color um, with our slate walls. And I wanted the interior walls to be something other than that wood, just because I felt like for a hotel and for a living or hospitality space, I wanted something that felt a little more homey and less rustic, I guess, if that makes sense. And I chose that color because it seems like something you may see in that time period. I use that color too for the trains of our wooden roller coaster, as well as a similar color I will eventually use for the bank that we build later in this episode. Anyhow, I went with three different shops on the inside, and I chose the Western Hats stall, and then in the middle I chose the Sheriff Balloon stall, and then on the far right I chose the Golden Nugget Candy stall. So at the moment, aside from our little candy shop at the very front of the park, we don't really have any other candy stores that I can recall. And the Golden Nugget Candy is fitting to the Western theme. It has obviously it's sort of meant to be Gold Rush themed, so I went with that and thought that would be a fitting choice for the stall. And it doesn't quite fit in with the restaurant we will build later, which is what the bank is, and it doesn't fit in with the ice cream shop. Maybe a little more with that, but nevertheless, that is when I decided to make that stall. So that is that. Just doing a little work there, replacing that sort of cobblestone path with dirt. Just I thought that would look a little bit better. And then putting a ceiling in here. And I started by using my normal office wall ceiling, but I decided to change it to the colonial ceiling because it looked a little better, like a white plaster ceiling. I thought that would look better for the time period. And then you can see I recolored the hotel just to make it a little darker and less standoutish. And then I used the western port or the porch pillar corners to sort of cover up that little green overlap there from the inside wall. And that didn't work perfectly on the one side because of the way the pillars work, um, but those pillars are slightly wider than a lot of the wall pieces, so you can use them in that instance, or you can even use them just to create pillars. I don't know how to explain it, but you can use the way they cut through wall pieces and protrude a little bit to your advantage in different builds. And we may have some more opportunities down the line to showcase that. Anyhow, and then I just did a full wraparound roof, similar, I think, to what I did for the sheriff's station, and then did that sunken flat roof just so we can put in the air conditioner but not have it visible from ground level. That way, it's more of a modern roof from a functional standpoint, but from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks I guess not modern. Yeah. So that's just taking into account sight lines and what the guests can and cannot see. Of course, if they're at the top of the roller coaster, what they can and can't see changes a little bit. But in many cases, I think sight lines kind of go away when you're that high up in the air. Nevertheless, I just put a little wooden fence alongside our roller coaster, that turnaround, just to make it look a little better. And now that our building is encroaching on that territory, I decided it was a good time to revisit that fencing with something that looks a a little better. And speaking of making things look a little better, the back of our saloon is very visible to guests, and I decided I wanted to make that look a little better. So I had these little dormer uh, dormer window sections put in. I think they're maybe a little bigger than that. I don't know if you could call them dormers, um, but I sort of put those in just to make it look good from the other side, and that's the side that faces the lake, which is visible from the entire main path. So it'll look good at a distance as well as up close. Not that it needs to look perfect. Anyhow, um, along those lines, I decided, well, as it will become clear later, I decided to move the path that goes right behind there a little further back. And the reason for that was because I wanted plenty of room for the restaurant we are about to build. And you can see me starting with that now, building the interior, placing the floor, and this, as I mentioned, will be the building that becomes a bank on the exterior, and then on the interior, it'll be much like a lot of our other restaurants. And I needed more space for it, obviously, because I wanted to have plenty of seating on the inside, but also along the back side, I wanted a room for a kitchen area, and you'll see my process with that in a little bit. Granted, it is pretty straightforward. Mostly the same as the other sort of uh, you know kitchen areas I've done. So nothing too crazy. And then right here, I'm just putting in our stalls that will eventually be where people purchase their food from, and laying down the cobblestone foundation for our building. And of course, as I do with most of my builds, I laid out the general shape of the building before refining it. You can see here I'm lifting up the tiles, and if this is the first episode you've seen, you'll see that I will start placing benches back to back, and lifting up the tiles allows me to place them back to back. And then we can sink those tiles back down, um, and that will create the effect of having booths. Of course, there are no tables, unfortunately. However, if you want that sort of booth-like seating style, or just a more compact seating style, that's a good technique to use. And you can use that technique too if you want to have like um, sort of concert hall style floor seating, where you have rows of seats facing one direction. You can do that as well. And we haven't quite done that in this park, but I have done it in other parks, and it is an effective technique. But moving on from that, you can see where the wall initially went right up to the path. I took it back one. That way I could have windows right next to those seats, just as we have done in a similar fashion with our booth style seating, and then have room for a porch on the front. And I think it looks great when you can have the porch on those western buildings. It really sells the look. The only thing I don't really care for, and I think maybe I would try to do it a little differently if I was going to revisit this section, is I wouldn't put all the porch buildings on one side of the area, on one side of the street, or on one side of the midway, just because it feels a little imbalanced. But at the same time, um, I feel like no one would have said anything had I not said it. So do with that information what you will. And I apologize if it ruined the Germanator Studios Isle of Ages experience for you. But I'm not that sorry, because it's just a game. Anyhow, now I'm just using filler words to try and avoid having to narrate what's on screen. So here you can see where I was trying to figure out what to do about roofing the kitchen section, and what I ended up doing is bringing that back by one. I realized that the space in this game there's a lot more space within like a one wide tile than it seems, and at that length, really the kitchen could just be a long line of stoves and cooktops and counter space, and you really don't need a lot of depth when you have a lot of width. Um, so I was not too concerned about how much space the people in the kitchen had. Anyway, And then you'll notice on the top layer, um, I sort of built the roof in halves. So we have the left half, which looks like a normal roof. It's what we've been doing in this section. And then along here, along this top half, is where am building. Well, basically, I'm just making it more of like a block or square building, just to make it look more like an old Western style bank, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it, but just something to mix up the roof sort of skyline of this section. And of course, where the ceiling was in the restaurant, I used the black ceiling or black office roof pieces, and then for the actual roof of the building, I used the gray ones as we've been doing. And I'm doing a similar thing here, building that ceiling and roof in a couple layers. And now to finish it all off, we're putting the bank sign all along there. So I think we've hit the three different signs in the western wall set. We have our sheriff building, our hotel building, and now our bank building. And now I'm just adjusting that wall so everything lines up properly. And but yeah, with now we will change the color of this building momentarily, but with the completion of it, um, that begs the question: what other buildings should we put in here? We have space for one or two more, so if you guys have some ideas, I would definitely love to hear it. Um, anyhow, so I decided to change the sort of this block section of the bank building to that earth tone green color. I feel like a western bank looks good in the color green, and then that offshoot section of the building, I just went with an orange color just to sort of differentiate it. And that also, I feel like, despite it being one building, um, on the inside, on the outside, it sort of makes it look more like two buildings, and it alters the way the space appears to the guests. I don't really know how to best explain that. Um, but basically, it's creating the illusion of having more buildings and thus having a denser town, if that makes sense. But I don't really know how else to word that. Um, anyhow, we're just going through in our free cam, painting the interior and making sure everything gets painted properly. And the little ordering area I painted white just to differentiate it and just to sort of differentiate the two sides to that building on the interior. And of course, adding a sign out front of both of these buildings. So we end up calling the bank Bankers Bistro, and our hotel, I believe, is called the Boarding House Boutique. And I thought those were some fitting names for the builds. And then inside our bistro, we are selling bison burgers and French fries. And I believe lemonade is the choice we did for our drink. And the reason for that is because right next door is the saloon where you can get other drinks. So I wanted to differentiate it so you can get whatever you want to drink back in this area, pretty much, within reason. Can't get the Rocket Boost Cantina or whatever it is back here. Anyhow, and then because this is a place that serves bison burgers, I found the animatronic bison and just put one on the porch. I thought it would be kind of funny, maybe like a statue or a sculpture or something. And this is also, I guess, a little nod to, I believe it's Custer, South Dakota. All along their main street, they have, I think they're like bison or cows or something, but they're sculptures. Um, I think they are sculpted bison all along the main street. If you've been there, you would definitely know what I'm talking about. Um, but that's just a memory I have from a long time ago when I was, I think, 10 or 11, and we went there on vacation. Um, anyhow, now we are working on the back side of this building, or both of these buildings. So obviously, landscaping wise, there's not a lot of room for it on our main street in the western section. So we're gonna get to that, but I just realized first we are doing the coolers. So obviously every kitchen needs coolers for the food. So we have our cooler and refrigerator combo there. or a freezer combo, I mean. And because that does not look old Western, I wanted to block it off with a little fence. So I just built a wooden fence there, and we'll build that up a tiny bit higher. But also putting in some doorway access to the interior, and also, of course, for emergency exits. Those are being put along there. And we put a little double door in on the back for deliveries too, and that seemed sufficient to me. And then right along in here, just so there's access to the outdoor cooler uh, doors, I just put a little gateway in there made out of the wooden fence, the pine wood fence. And in a moment, we will extend that to be 1/3 height taller, just so that way it is a high enough that the inside can't really be seen by any guests. That was just a little extra measure I decided to take. And what else? Oh yes, and a little access door in case there aren't any deliveries and they don't want to use or move that whole giant fence. And then finally, we are getting to the landscaping. So as I had sort of mentioned, the backs of these builds are still visible to guests. So I wanted to make them look a little nicer by adding in some landscaping. And I just went through the western shrubbery and found some stuff to add in and make it look nice. And I think it turns out pretty well in the end. Maybe there can be a little more refinement that we go through and do, but for the most part, I think it gets the job done just fine. Um, I wanted to make it, I wanted to fill the area out, but because it's Western and sort of things are dry and dying, I decided not to have it too dense. It was a little bit sparse in terms of the plant choices. But along the main pathway, we went back to our standard um, sugar pine and small green bush planter. So this is much more green and lively. Um, and let me know if you think that should be different. If you want to see that as more of the western shrubbery, maybe that'll look a little better. But I figured since this is on the border of the western area, we could leave it as just that main pathway, and it would be fine. Um, but I am always, always, always welcome to your feedback in the comments below. So just let me know what you guys think. Anyhow, now I'm at that point again that I seem to reach in every video where I do not know what to say. Oh, now we know what to say. So now we're putting in our favorite lighting, and I actually do really enjoy doing lighting. I think I hate having to get to the point where I do it, but once I start doing lighting, it's sort of a fun little challenge to figure out how to put the lighting in so you have enough lighting without having too much. Because if you put lights too close together, everything will sort of get washed out and very bright, and you don't want that. But you don't want it to be too dark because that could be a safety hazard. So luckily, I think my lighting placement in this section was pretty good. Um, and then where I didn't put lights or trash bins, I decided to put benches. And I thought that worked pretty well. But we are coming up on the end of the video, so I am going to wish you all a great rest of your day. And I will see you all in the next one. A good bye-bye.